Welcome in to the Magic the Gathering unofficial audiobooks podcast. I'm your host, Phil Dawson, and today is our final podcast before we start up book 3 of the Artifact Cycle, Time Streams. And as promised in our recap episode, I was going to try to get a lore master of sorts on with us to really help set the table for what we're about to get into. And I couldn't be happier to be joined by a co-host of the VorthosCast, Loreley Weisel-Lebrizzi. Loreley, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, it's good to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so we'll jump into the lore shortly, but I wanted to start with you a little bit, and let's start with the VorthosCast itself. For those who don't know what it is, can you explain what the show is about, how it came to be, and how you got involved?
Backstory of the VorthosCast. It goes back to around Magic Origins, when I started to get way more involved in talking about Magic lore online, largely on Tumblr and Twitter, around the same time that Jay and Ellie and Carrie Thomas had started. If you followed Vorthos shenanigans on the internet over the last 7-ish years, you've probably run across one or two of us at some point, maybe all of us, and we all got to be friends, talking about theories about who the Raven Man could be. And Jay had published a very large article over on MTG Salvation that Carrie and I contributed a lot to, and from there we just became good Vorthos pals, and every now and then would float the idea for a podcast, and then like, oh, that's a lot of work, so we're not going to do it. And then Dominaria was coming out, and we were like, this is the perfect opportunity, because this set's going to be like, they've explicitly said the theme of this set is going to be talking about history. So if we wanted to start a podcast, this was the opportunity. So the three of us started. And we basically just started introducing people to the history of Dominaria, the characters, the events, basically all the background knowledge that you would need to get all the references that ended up in the set. And then we talked about the Magic Stories by Martha Wells that got published during that set, and that was 200 episodes ago. We are this week, actually, that we are recording this episode. We are recording our 200th episode of the VorthosCast. So we've added a couple folks over the years. We've had a couple other co-hosts join us and then leave us. We currently have Brian and Chris on, and so yeah, we've just been doing that for over 3 years now.
That's so cool. And it's really good. It is so great. And the most recent episode I listened to was all about Elspeth, and obviously the new set coming out. So it's really cool. And you guys do such a great job. And so it's really fun for me too. So as we get into this, what was it? What character, what set? So the Dominaria set is what started the podcast. What was it for you as a Magic player, or what got you into Magic personally? And then the story started becoming maybe the main focus for you to grab your interest.
Well, I started playing Magic in 2003. I was aware that Magic existed. I had seen the Microprose game at a friend's house. Another friend had some cards, and I'd seen the art, so I knew it was a thing that existed. And I was shown, this was the summer 8th edition came out, and so Onslaught Block was the thing happening at the time, and I saw the card Quicksliver from Legions, and I was like, what the heck is a sliver? You read the card text, you can cast all your sliver cards as though they were instants, and I'm like, well, okay, so it's a sliver and it helps other slivers. What does that mean? And a friend explained to me what slivers were, and I'm like, wow, that's cool as hell. I would like to learn to play Magic because these seem awesome. And at that point, I didn't know Magic had stories. It was a long time until I really got into the lore. A big part of that was accessibility. Having Magic story in novels that I didn't know existed because there was no marketing for them, didn't help me get into Magic story. But a cool thing happened in Khans of Tarkir, which was a web fiction version of the story. got published, and it was free and online right on the Wizards website, and the website that I was reading daily articles on, because they used to have a lot more articles, and so I was like, great. And I am I'm a writer and a lit person by nature in general, so I got immediately sucked in, and over the years have kept up with new things, have gone back and read a bunch of old things, and just amassed an archive of primary source documents that have just, God, there's so much magic lore.
Right. Yeah, it's
part
hard.
of the reason for the podcast.
Exactly.
It's there's a lot of magic lore, and it's really hard for like a single person to experience it all. So part of the goal of the podcast is to like, hey, if you don't know all like the not even deep cuts, even the mildly deep cuts are like hard to pick up on all of the things. So part of the podcast is like, hey, you don't have time as a listener to do all the things we have done. And so we'll do that for you and convey that information.
Yeah, and it really goes over well. I know too, for me is a similar experience. The Invasion books. I happen to have a friend who runs a local game store in Madison, Wisconsin. Shout out Mox Mania and Magic Mike. But he let me borrow this Invasion cycle of books. So I played casually, and it was fun because I knew him. And then these books were just so intense and grotesque and filled with great descriptions of what Phyrexia is and all these adventures and characters I had never heard of before in the magic lore. And so then you start digging, and like you said, it's like this, this spiral that goes down like, what, where, whoa. And so, and then because I just happened to be in, radio stuff, and the books were so good, and I just want to share them. That's the basic, like, people have to hear these stories because they're so cool. So
yeah, this is a very cool project you have going. I know there's the other major audio book podcast project was Voice of All, which was reading the web fiction. But as far as I know, you're the first person who's really delved into some of the older novels and stuff.
Yeah, so
in this kind of format. That's great.
Yeah, and it's been so fun and great response too. So I'm loving doing it. Speaking of that, we as a podcast, so we're just about to get into time streams. We finished Planeswalker. We said goodbye to Zancha and Rat, and we're under the impression that Urza is pretty much a psycho, but powerful and obsessed with Phyrexia. And I didn't get to do this. I didn't even think about this after the Brothers' War. So I was hoping to have you on and help fill in the gaps that we missed and need to know as we get ready for time stream. So,
I just wanted to, I laughed when he sent me the list because we're looking at about 3,000 years of Dominarian history.
All right. So let's pick out, I don't know, let's pick out 100 of the most important things. Let's start here, though, because significant characters, we didn't get a chance to read the thread. I just don't have the book. The characterization that we have so far of Yawgmoth is almost like this Voldemort from Harry Potter character. He's the ineffable he who shall not be named, but his story is in the Thran, correct? So what is he about, and what can you characterize him and what he was like before he is this ineffable, that the vision that we have of him? If you can, if it's
topical for the modern day, he is basically a medical charlatan. His big shtick in the Thran Empire was that he not even, I said topical for today, and now I'm going to reference Mission Impossible 2 because his whole plan is basically the plot of Mission Impossible 2. He created diseases that he also created the cures for, and then sold and got famous as a physician. He conned his way into the inner circles of the Thran elite, which in the novel are represented by the artificers Glacian and Rebek. Yawgmoth is, God, he's just a bad dude. So at his core, he's a eugenicist. The novel The Thran is largely about his descent into Like if you think he lacks empathy by manipulating plagues for his own personal benefit, he has even less empathy for other people by the end.
Oh.
In which case, he has the fully formed concepts of flesh is a disease that can only be cured by the mechanical superiority of Phyrexia.
Sure.
And if you just came out of Planeswalker, you met Gix.
Yeah. He was on the Thran too, right?
Mm-hmm. He was. So the Thran. The thing about the Thran novel is that there's literally no good guys in this book. Well, Rebecca sort of right at the end does a thing for the greater good, but the Thran are bad people. They have the first really known human empire in Dominarian history, 5,000 years before Urza and Mishra were born. Right. They have these they are very talented artificers. They don't really know about colored mana. But they have this technology called Power Stones, which contain mana and physical space. They're also basically radioactive. Again, topical. The Thran is, God, if you want to understand a lot of things happening in the world today, read the Thran, because the Thran's radioactive technology ends up essentially poisoning a whole bunch of their population with a disease they call Typhus. And the Thran solution to this problem of a bunch of radiation sickness individuals is to stuff them in a cave below their floating capital of Halcyon. So we have the Caves of the Damned, where they basically take a bunch of chronically ill and disabled citizens of the Thran Empire and stuff them into a corner and forget about them. This is where Gix is. Gix, you might understand, is a little upset about how he and his folks have been treated. And so when Yawgmoth comes around and says, hey, y'all want to get revenge on the Thran Empire? They're all very happy to join him and go to Phyrexia, because he does say, hey, by the way, I can get you revenge on the people who wronged you, and I can cure your disease. By the way, the cure for the disease is to just stop being made of flesh, because metal is better. So everyone come to my conversion chambers and with my glistening oil, and I will turn you into horrific necro machines, and you will be my army. And Gix is really happy about this. That's kind of how they get their start. It is important to note, though, for all the horror and awful things Yawgmoth does, the first time he travels through the Blind Eternities, a planeswalker named Dyfed takes him to a plane called Perulia. And the trip, Yawgmoth's human body is so feeble that he literally gets a tummy ache so bad he keels over and starts crying next to Dyfed. And I think that's just very wimpy of him, and I appreciate that little detail.
Yeah, that it seems pretty wimpy for the ineffable at that,
right? I just really appreciate that, like, Yawgmoth's whole transition to unstoppable death cloud of ultimate destruction, god of a machine hell, and he starts as this wimpy little sniveling con man. And
it makes me want to read this book. I really feel bad that I don't have it.
The big setup for Brothers, where I think gives you most of the important parts that you would have needed to know from the Thran, which is largely that Rebecca sealed Phyrexia away in the Caves of Koilos by breaking the Power Stone. Which is obviously very important to the Urza Mishra story, because it's the whole reason two snobby rich kids nearly destroyed the world.
Okay, so let's move on. Let's actually right where you're at here. So they go on to, I guess, almost destroy the entire world, and then there's this 3,000-year ice age. Now, what I want to know about the ice age is, do we meet anyone that's important, like, later on? Like, did we miss a character that we need to know for, the rest of the artifact into the Weatherlight cycle? Like, are there important characters that come back that we didn't get a chance to meet through this Ice Age story?
So the big one. So you mentioned earlier reading Invasion and being like, wow, there's so much here. And so the invasion block is where most of this stuff is going to get picked up again. The invasion block does something very silly and says, hey, let's take all of Magic lore for all of the, like, what, 7-ish years, 6 or 7-ish years it's been around, and put everything into this big climax. So like a whole bunch of the planeswalkers in the invasion block are from the old Armada comics from like 96, which are vastly frenetic in quality. I adore some of them, and then some of them are but characters like Freyalise and Taysir and there's the other one, Christina, are from the Armada comics. Lord Windgrace is from there's two anthologies by Harper Prism, Tapestries and Distant Plains. Windgrace is name dropped in those as just a cat warrior planeswalker who's revered as a god, and he gets brought into the story. Teferi existed in Mirage and gets brought up, and God, Dario was, I think, in one of the Harper Prism things, either one of the novels or the short story. So they like excavated a bunch of characters from there, but mostly most of the stuff that happens in the Ice Age is pretty tight to the Ice Age. Yeah, God, even Empress Galena doesn't show up again until Invasion, but that's because of time travel shenanigans. Yeah, the thing. So I said the thing about 3,000 years of Ice Age history before. And the reality is we actually don't know what happens on Dominaria for most of that time. We have so the Brothers War ends in like 62 AR.
Right.
And I think it's 62. It's the 60s AR. And that begins the Ice Age, which doesn't officially start for a couple more centuries. And there's kind of this interstitial time where the climate's going to hell. And that's when we get Fallen Empires. And about the collapse of the civilizations of Sarpedia, which is basically Dominaria in Australia. And we get the Dark, which covers a lot of the things happening on Terracier. But for most of the Ice Age, all we know about it is that it was cold and people were generally unhappy about it.
Yeah.
It's not really till right at the end of the Ice Age where characters like Freyalise get introduced. But I'm hard pressed to think of anyone very specifically in any of the artifact cycle who is from the Ice Age. There's like historical backstory about the formation of New Argive, but
how about in terms of so like in Planeswalker, we got a good view of, you know, like the Blind Eternities and how things work in the Magic world. Did we get anything like that in Ice Age? Because what I feel like we've missed in at least the first two books is really like how mana and magic work.
Yeah, so that's partially intentional. Like a big thing in the Brothers War is that most people don't know magic exists.
Right. We get a little hint of it.
Right. And so Brothers War is largely about Urza and Mitra, who are artificers and working with Thran technology. Again, the Thran didn't know colored mana existed.
Yeah.
They didn't really have complex mana theories that would eventually develop on Dominaria. Everything was done with these magical stones that they're like, hey, this works. And so that's largely what Urza and Mitra experiment with. And it's only in Teresia City and the Union, the Third Path, where you have characters like Drafna and Hercule.
Right.
Hercule's really the first person in Dominarian history to rediscover that magic exists. Hercule's connections with the land is her making mana bonds and using that to power magic. And so those books don't really talk about magic. Like Brothers War really doesn't address it much, except for those discussions from Hercule because it's just not a thing people know how to do yet. And then when you get to Planeswalker, like Urza's already this ultimate powerful being, and like Xantra's just a Phyrexian and like doesn't do big fancy magic things.
Right.
She's just a badass.
Sarah mentions like, she's
Yeah.
built out of white mana,
Yes.
and you can't have black mana and blah blah blah.
Yes.
But like there's no explanation for it.
God, there's some explanations in that. Again, there's explanations in there's a 4-issue series in the Armada comics called Wayfarer, which take place shortly after the Ice Age ends, and is largely involve Christina of the Woods, she's about 1,000-year-old planeswalker at this point, teaching a very young Jason Carthalion, who becomes a planeswalker later, about mana and magic. And like most there's discussions about how magic works in some of the short stories in the anthologies, which are largely set between the Brothers' War and the Ice Age.
Yeah.
But the Ice Age itself, there's I'm trying to think if the Gathering Dark goes into it. So the Ice Age cycle largely follows Joda, who's a descendant of either Urza or Mishra, because we don't know who Harbin's dad is.
Right.
He's a descendant of Harbin, we know that. And becomes immortal because he falls into the Fountain of Youth, trying to hide from, I think it's goblins. He's pursued by some kind of villain and falls into the Fountain of Youth by accident and accidentally becomes immortal. But Joda does some exploration of magic, but
we're left with still like it's a mystery, right?
Yeah, like,
or there's knowledge of how to. Some people have the knowledge how to use it, but it doesn't go into any sort of description, right?
Right. And one also, the way magic is generally portrayed in the mold, like magic in general tries to avoid being too overly technical about how its metaphysics work. And especially when it comes to like using magic, like we have 30 years of lore and we've like can cobble together theories of mana and stuff. But the average magic user like can use magic and they don't know how it works necessarily. Like the average pyromancer doesn't internalize that they're a red mage and they're specifically tapping into red mana from mountains.
Yeah, good point.
That's just not a thing that most mages in magic lore think about. You're only really going to encounter characters who think about magic that way if they are like specifically mana scholars, or again some of the old planeswalker stuff. A lot of the really old magic fiction goes into like tons of technical detail about how magic works, and then some of those rules have changed over the years. But yeah,
again, we're talking to Loreley Weisel-Lebrizzi about our next book, Time Streams, coming up, and you can hear them on the VorthosCast. And again, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. I just have one kind of last question for you.
Yeah.
Maybe two. Sorry, I got two. Okay, before we get into what we need to know before Time Streams, I have a personal question. What's going on with like dragons at this time? What is like is there a concurrent storyline that has, the elder dragons, or is that like happened way before? Like what's happening concurrently? How about that? What's happening like concurrently as we go into Time Streams? Is there on other planes or other things that are happening as we get into this after Planeswalker?
If you give me one moment.
Sure. Because I know there's other stuff happening at the same time. And so like, because all of it's going to be pushing into, and I guess I have the concern with Urza's time travel and whatnot. So I don't know how it works. I'm so excited to read what happens.
The big thing with Urza's time travel mostly is that it doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
And when
Spoiler
Karn does,
alert. No.
you'll see in time streams that things go very, very badly with time travel.
Oh, great! I can't wait.
Oh yeah, it is a mess. All right. Oh, so we are looking at. All right, that is Planeswalker, founding of Talaria. All right. So it's funny you mentioned dragons and elder dragons. The founding of Talaria happens around, so things happening vaguely at the same time on other planes.
Yeah.
A big part of this, great, everything neatly ties together because I got to talk about Concept Tarkir. Around the time that Urza is founding the Talarian Academy, and then a handful of years later, the Time Streams novel takes place, is around the same time that Sarkhan has gone back in time to save Ugin, and then the changes the history of Tarkir, and the Elder Dragons usurp the clans. This happens around the same time. And I believe we're not terribly off from the events of Ogratha. Yeah, we're shortly after this is God, I don't want to say like too many spoilers for time streams,
yeah. I mean that's a good. I think that's a good little teaser right there. Like they were around the same time when Sarkhan goes back, and
so like because of Sarkhan's Bolas essentially mucks up Ugin and Azor's plan to trap him. So this is also the same time that Azor gets trapped on Ixalan, and everything goes wrong with their plan, and he panics and hides the immortal sun later. And so not too long after this, Ravi is going to ring the apocalypse chime on Ogratha, and devastate that plane. And Sarah is eventually going to go there and connect with the Planeswalker Faraz, and they meet Baron Sengir, and they nurse Ogratha back to health. So these three major events kind of happen in this weird cluster, unrelated.
Right.
But like it's just kind of funny how the math worked out that these things happen, I think, within the same century.
Very cool. I'm so glad you found that information. That's like, and I can picture that happening while Urza's teaching class or whatever he's doing. I don't even know. We'll find out.
Yeah, Urza's like, oh my god, I gotta stop Phyrexia. Meanwhile, two elder dragons are still like fighting their 20,000-year-old grudge match.
Yeah, wow.
And he doesn't even know who they are.
Right. Yeah, like this is not even a thing to him right now. Wow. Okay, that's more than enough. Great information, Loreley. I really appreciate it so much. Thank you. I think my listeners are going to love it. Once again, the VorthosCast, everyone go check it out. It's really good. It's really informative and funny. So Loreley, thank you so much for joining me. And hopefully we can do it again later.
Yeah. Thank you so much for calling our podcast funny.
Well, I get some of the jokes. I don't get all of them.
We have a good time.
Hey, we do. It sounds fun.
Yeah, we're over on SoundCloud at the VorthosCast, on Twitter at the VorthosCast, and so yeah, we have a good time.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks. Enjoy time streams.
Okay, there we go, everyone. There is our, what are we calling this? Previewsode? Sure, why not? Loreley Weisel-Lebrizzi, thank you so much, the co-host from the VorthosCast. Okay, the next episode, people, is going to be Chapter 1 of Time Streams. It'll come shortly, in a couple, I don't know when, but soon enough. I hope you're ready for it. Don't forget, you can follow along on our Discord. Just check in the show notes. We have a lot of great conversations going on there right now, and it's a lot of fun so far. And if you want to support the show, you're more than welcome to by checking things out on Patreon. Patreon.com, and just search me, Phil Dawson, Making the Magic, the Gathering audio books, unofficial audio books. Okay, that's going to do it. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next time as we start